It's my first time at the CDC, but I'm sure some of you know me very well. I used to work for Merck, and now I speak out against the dangers that the pharmaceutical companies don't tell you about pharmaceutical drugs and vaccines. So when I was trained at Merck, which was a very intense training, we were told that all drugs go through a gold standard process, which is a double-blind, placebo-based, long-term studies. Well, for vaccines, as most of you know in here, they don't have to go through that process because they're categorized differently. So what's happening is we're seeing a lot of these vaccines being put onto the market, and our children are test subjects. And right now we're seeing almost half of all children with a chronic illness. And if you look at the studies, the independent studies that are not funded by the pharmaceutical companies that have filled this room, and you will see over 1,000 studies, more than 1,000 studies, showing the harm of the vaccines that are released onto the market without proper testing. So I ask that when you're considering the immunization schedules today, that you really take a step back, because our children and adults, you know, in the US, we've never been sicker. Our health is suffering. And I have done a lot of research on the difference between injection and ingestion. Now, this is something the pharmaceutical companies will never tell you. But anything injected goes straight into the circulation. It goes to vital organs. There's a great study on aluminum, which shows that 95+% is absorbed in the body tissues. When you eat something, when you drink something, when you inhale something, 95% of that is filtered out through our body's natural detox processes. So anything you inject is going to be far, far more dangerous and far more potent. So what's happening now is because the pharmaceutical industry, it's a saturated drug market and it's expensive. There's liability, which unfortunately there's no liability for vaccine makers with vaccines. So you're seeing all of these new vaccines in development, almost 300. Because if they can call it a vaccine, they can A, inject the body with toxins and make them far more potent and create further health issues that sell the drugs that make them, you know, the most powerful industry in the world. And we're seeing them without liability. So they go through the committee here. And I sat this morning and I was disturbed. And I've watched this on the television, you know, on the live stream before. But I was really disturbed. Doctors asking about safety signals and when safety information is going to be available. And the answer is always like 5 sentences that distract with no real answers. Well, enough people have to be hurt by the vaccine before we'll know if it's safe. Enough people have to die from the vaccine before we'll know it's safe. It's not acceptable because the American population pays really good tax dollars to make sure that this committee is not biased and to make sure that this committee is putting the people of America before the profits of the pharmaceutical industry. And I saw it firsthand when I sold Vioxx for Merck, that these agencies, including the CDC and the FDA, are not doing their job anymore. And so I ask you today, when you consider these recommendations, consider all of the children and the adults and all the pregnant women that are going to suffer because of your vote. Because there may be a lot of money backing these recommendations from the pharmaceutical industry, but you are beholden to the American people. Please don't forget your mission. Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful to be here today. My name is Judy A. Mikovits. I'm a PhD biochemist and molecular biologist, have done cancer research largely at the National Cancer Institute in Frederick, Maryland, since 1980. I started working as a natural products chemist and a protein chemist in fermentation chemistry, and my job was to make the first interferon alpha, the first immune therapy that actually went into people to cure cancer when we discovered how powerful interferons were for the magic bullet against cancer. So the Time magazine March 31st, 1980, when I was a senior in college at University of Virginia, was the big if. And there was a droplet, and it was interferon. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. So we first started working with the first human retroviruses. Those are retroviruses like HIV. So we were among the first people to begin recognizing that when the young men were getting sick with all of these opportunistic infections, it used to be called gay-related immune deficiency GRID, and we isolated the virus, HIV, and pretty well changed the world with our research. My PhD thesis was actually shifted the paradigm. So at the time we thought that a type of T cell was the problem in the disease, and that was the T cell that was being killed, but it wasn't being killed by the virus. It was being killed by indirect mechanisms. We used to call it bystander effects because my PhD thesis, in fact, was defended a week after Magic Johnson declared he was HIV positive. That was November 14, 1991. In 2009, we were working on autism and a disease called myalgic encephalomyelitis. And many of the families with the patients had different kinds of cancers, and there was a little cluster of lymphoma and leukemias in Klein Village, a cluster of ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, a motor neuron disease, and this chronic fatigue syndrome. And it looked like a virus, it smelled like a virus, a retrovirus, because those are the kinds of viruses that disrupt the immune system. And several other investigators back in the 90s had actually isolated retroviruses from these people, but the government called them contaminants, that they weren't real and that they didn't have anything to do with the disease. Well, we isolated a new family of viruses that were called xenotropic murine leukemia virus-related virus. So these viruses were murine leukemia viruses, mouse viruses. And so spin forward 2 years, our paper published in one of the best scientific journals in the world in Science, October 8, 2009. Usually that makes one's career. In my case, it ended my life as a scientist as I knew it. Basically the realization, the big oh my God, of all of those sequences we've seen and all of those proteins and all of these contaminants are causing disease. The fact that they were real was just too much. For 25 million Americans are infected with the viruses that came out of the lab, out of labs into humans via contaminated blood and vaccines. And that was so I was fired, jailed, without cause, without hearing, without any civil rights at all, just drug out of my house in shackles one day, November 18, 2011. I refused to denounce the data. I refused to say it was a mistake. We had the data, I showed the data, I showed all of the data, and I just refused. They basically said, tell everybody you made it all up and you can go home. And if you don't, we'll destroy you. And they did. I mean, economically as a profession, but they didn't because thank God for my faith and for my husband and for my family and for the patients, because in order to steal one's passion, my passion wasn't money. Scientists don't make money. My passion was helping people, and the patients never walked away from me. So in 2011, another AIDS researcher in a journal called Frontiers in Microbiology wrote a paper that really cost me a lot. I didn't know he was going to write this paper, but it basically said the most likely way that these murine leukemia virus-related viruses, these types of viruses, entered humans was through vaccines. So when did we start vaccines? 1953, 1934, right in the 30s with the polio, and what we were doing to attenuate, to make the virus less pathogenic, less toxic, is we were passing them through mouse brains. So we were passing them through the brains of mice, and every scientist who works with these viruses and worked at the National Cancer Institute recognized the possibility that if you put human tissue and mouse tissue together, the possibility is that you're going to pick up a virus that is silent in the mouse. That is, it doesn't hurt the mouse, but it kills the human or causes serious disease in the human. So I want people to understand, I want them to think. We live in a society where we're bombarded with commercials, big pharma, so they give you all the warning on Opdivo, the immune therapy that's a new chance for new life. And when you look at the little picture at the bottom, it says they live 12 months versus the 9 months of the control. The control, these experiments aren't done. The vaccines don't have to be made or regulated like drugs. They're biologics. They're given a free pass. There's a vaccine court. You can't sue the doctor. You can't sue the manufacturer. There's a federal court that oversees vaccine injury, and it's more corrupt than anything you could ever imagine. And so they do everything they can to keep the public from knowing that every single shot damages you, and you might not see the cancer for 2 decades. And that's the very first thing. If we lived a biblical life, but also a biblical life is render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That's money. They could have all my money. They don't have any right to do anything to my body. They don't have any right to inject anything I don't want injected into my body. So to live a healthy life, prevent anyone from forcing you to take toxic drugs, and it's mind control. I was the same way. I was brainwashed. How are we brainwashed in our society? We all have the TV on, interestingly, in this whole XMRV thing. My mom was watching Good Morning America one day back in Frederick, Maryland, and I'm in California. This is probably 2010 or so, or 11, when the press shut everything down. And she says, Judy, it just went around the ticker tape at the bottom of the screen that XMRV is proven false. You can all go home. It was a lab contaminant. Well, it may well have been a lab contaminant, but it's in humans and it's been there quite a while. So we need to turn off these TVs. The media is 95%. Big Pharma owns the media. Our politicians, we need to dig deeper. We need to look in the truth. We need to start reading books again. Our book, Plague, is at plaguethebook.com. You can listen to it. You don't have to read it. You can read a chapter at a time. We wrote it that way so that every chapter stands alone, a little like the Bible, because you can always find it important. And it's a story. It's a story every day in jail. It's not all this science. It's what's it like when a 53-year-old woman one day finds herself in jail. Well, I started saying the Lord's Prayer and said, what is going on? And so what I'd like everybody to do is dig deeper, not just my book, but Dr. Suzanne Humphrey's Dissolving Illusions and Rising from the Dead, a brilliant, prominent internist, and the whole dumbing down. We've made our doctors our gods. You don't ask questions. Why not? Scientists don't ask questions. All I did wrong, my only crime, was I asked too many questions. Really? In the United States of America, we're censored. Everything's censored. So to look at things like natural news, to come to meetings like the Truth About Cancer, I was just floored today because, today was the first time I was treated like a human being who had knowledge for a very long time. And so it matters.
Well, I hope, folks, that is proof positive for you that vaccines cause illnesses by design to make people and our children sick. Get them sick, keep them sick for life. You've got guaranteed profits. We rank 38th in the world in quality of care, number 1 in cost, and nobody seems to care. This is back from 2008, 2.3 trillion, 16% of our budget taken up on ill health care. Now Obamacare makes it mandatory and the costs keep soaring. soaring, and the quality goes down. More people are in sickness, and as more people get in sickness, more people are spending on drugs. Did you know there's a war on drugs? Well, the drug war is winning because more people are getting sick, addicted to prescriptions. Prescriptions cost much more in the United States than they do in Canada, but more people are taking painkillers, and as it's not working, they're committing suicide and killing themselves. This was a report from the other day. Suicide rates are going up. Anything you get from free from corporations, you must question. Why are they giving out free flu shots? Why? Oh, they want to protect you. They want to make it better. Now they got 98% and they want the other 2%. Why? What is in these vaccines, folks? They're deadly. They keep you sick. They're attenuated, or they're attuned with the actual virus themselves. Look at the war on drugs. Look at the spending. Isn't it extremely, extremely profitable to continue the war on drugs when it never, ever gets any better? Who benefits? Cui bono? The prison systems, folks, and 1 in 5 are in there for drug-related infractions. And look at this: in California, it costs almost $76,000 to house inmates, more than it costs for a degree at Harvard. The drugs kill more people than guns, folks. Wake up. Why do they have beer and wine at gas stations if they don't want you to drive under the influence? Because it's another way they keep you hooked. They keep you hooked and then they book you. That's why they allow you to drive 10 miles over the speed limit when you're driving on the freeways, because everybody's guilty. And then they have citizen asset forfeitures where they confiscate your cash. Very profitable for the cops. And now they're including Medicaid and also marijuana as driving means buzzed DUI. This insanity must stop. So I hope this video gets at least some or one of you to stop and think about what you're doing to your children for life. They will be scarred for life with these vaccines. They have gene mutation. This is what the human genome is about. Gene mutation, chips, formaldehyde, aborted female stem cells, chicken embryos, mercury, the aluminum, all sorts that the doctors won't even tell you because the doctors don't read the inserts. They get reimbursed for vaccinations. Who are they serving, folks? If everybody gets healthy, they're out of business. Please wake up, alert others, share this video, and say no to vaccines. My child, my choice. Your state, my state, whoever state does not have a right to tell us what we have to put in our children. There is no law that is just to do that. All right, plain truth out. Love one another. Don't vaccinate.